Okay, well, I wanted to make a special part for the Prince of the Power of the Air because a lot of people have, again, this is one of those points where a lot of people have fairy tales and all sorts of wild theories about what this means. And again, my point is not to necessarily give you an exact explanation because I don't think anybody can do that. This is one of those times, remember, what do we want? We want to be bold with the things we can prove, for sure, with Scripture. And we want to be humble with the things that are a mystery. This is an example of the latter. This is an example of a place where there is a mystery. I don't know what the Prince of the Power of the Air means. I have some ideas, but I can't tell you for sure what it is, and I don't think anybody can. However, I can tell you what it's not. And that's the goal of today because we want to make sure you don't veer off into fairy tales. But Ephesians 2 verse 2, just to pull it up, in which you once walked following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. So there's three things being paralleled here. The spirit, i.e. the devil, that is working through the wicked, who is also the prince of the power of the air, who also relates to the course of this world, through the worldly matrix system that everything is in. All these things are related because they're being highlighted and paralleled to you in one sentence. Now, of course, there's many interpretations on this verse. It is a very difficult verse to interpret because there's no context. It's not so much that the Prince of the Power of the Air is this weird term. It is a unique term. It's not really used anywhere else. But there's no context, which is the problem. That's why it's so difficult. People today say that this means Satan controls the airwaves or electricity, or, all these sort of things where Satan is in charge of the air or the air molecules or whatever else. And this is, again, giving too much power and glory and credit to Satan that he doesn't deserve. God created the air. He created lightning. He created electricity. And he is sovereign over thunder and lightning and storms and electricity. We're going to look at a lot of verses that prove that. Exodus 20:18. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off. So when Yahweh descended on the mountain, there was thunder and lightning. 2 Samuel 22, verses 14 through 15. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice, and he sent out his arrows and scattered them, lightning, and routed them. So God is the one who sends lightning. Job 28:26. When he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder. God is the one who makes the way, meaning the way that it cleaves through the air. That's what I believe this is what this painting is, that it's saying God made the way. He decrees how the lightning will cleave in the air when you see it, which is a profound statement. Job 36, verse 30. Behold, he scatters his lightning about him and covers the roots of the sea. Verse 32. He covers his hands with the lightning and commands it to strike the mark. He is the one who covers his hands with lightning and throws it. Of course, there are counterfeits of that, and you can imagine probably the most popular counterfeit that most people know is Zeus. So we'll talk about that in a future verse here because Jesus does something very interesting with that. In Job 37, verse 3, we read, Under the whole heaven he lets it go, and his lightning to the corners of the earth. His lightning, God's lightning. God owns the lightning. Job 37, verse 11, he loads the thick cloud with moisture. The clouds scatter his lightning. Job 37, verse 15. Do you know how God lays his command upon them and causes the lightning of his cloud to shine? So again, whose lightning is it? It's God's. Psalm 29, verse 7. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. Now here you might also interpret it as kind of like fire or light, or lightning that comes, like when you, for example, when you see a, lightning that hits a tree, it catches on fire, or, a volcano that's bursting with fire also has lightning. So there's always an electrical component to some of these things. Psalm 105, verse 32. He gave them hail for rain and fiery lightning bolts through their land. You see, the word fiery here that's why I cited the previous one. Because sometimes fiery may relate to the sting of the lightning bolt, just the fact that it causes fire if it hits a tree or whatever. But fiery lightning bolts is coming from the Lord as judgment. Psalm 144, verse 6, flash forth the lightning and scatter them and send out your arrows and rout them. The prayer for God to execute justice by lightning. This is actually Psalm 1. Okay, messed up my little hyperlink there. This is Psalm 107, 29 through 31. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. Very important proof of deity for Jesus. Then they were glad that the waters were quiet, and he brought them to their desired haven. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man. So God is the one who calms the storm. Of course, you compare that to Mark 4, 39 through 41. Jesus awoke and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? The wind and the sea, the air, the wind, the storm, the lightning, they obey God, not the devil. Jeremiah 10, verse 13, when he utters his voice, there is a tumult of waters in the heavens. And he makes the mist rise from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for rain, and he brings forth the wind from his storehouses. God is the one who is sovereign over the weather. So for all the people who believe in climate change, these verses should be reviewed. Ezekiel 1, verse 13. As for the likeness of the living creatures, this is God's vision of God's chariot, basically, that Ezekiel had, supernatural situation. The appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. So you see, fire and lightning kind of seem to go together many, many times. But lightning coming from the throne of God, from this chariot situation that Ezekiel saw. Matthew 24, verse 27, the coming of Jesus. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. How is it going to be? Well, it's going to be like lightning that's flashing across the sky, which is probably going to be insane if you're alive to witness that. Revelation 4, verse 5. From the throne of God came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. This, and by the way, also the seventh trumpet, 7th seal, 7th bowl, all have the same things describing basically lightning, flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder. So again, all these things relate to God and being sovereign over these things. This is one of those areas where, again, we can give too much credit to the devil, so we have to be careful. Satan is not in control of lightning or the storms or the air or electricity. He's not prince of the power of the air. Does not mean, okay, he's the air element, sovereign. No, that's not true. People also use other places in the Old Testament, like Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, which we will look at in depth, I promise you. But these are supposedly about Satan, and, that say he was in charge of the worship choir in heaven, or he had the ability to sing, or had supernatural pipes crafted in his body of some kind to amplify his voice. None of these things are true, folks. We will read both of those chapters and sections, which, of course, they don't apply to Satan. They're actually directed at pagan kings, and we'll look at that. But people, again, they drift into myths. There's nothing of the sort, that Satan was in charge of the worship choir, that Satan was a musician, that Satan had pipes that he was singing through. There's none of that stuff. None of that stuff. It's all mythology. In the early 1900s, when radio was being developed, people originally objected to preaching the gospel over the airwaves because they said, well, prince of the power of the air, then it's just not going to work. So they didn't trust in a sovereign God because of this particular misinterpretation. They believed that basically if you preach the gospel over the radio, it's just doomed to fail because Satan is the prince of the power of the air. So of course they were deceived on that. Now it's not clear what the prince of the power of the air actually means. I think it probably has to do with Satan's domain. He is a spirit. He is in the heavenly realm in some sense. Of course, as of the cross, he's been removed from his power over death. So there's been a status change in his domain or dominion. But nonetheless, the letter was written after the cross. So he's called Prince of the Power of the Air after the cross, still meaning there's some sense of his domain in the world, and that he's able to go anywhere, probably. Not that he's omnipresent. So remember, he doesn't have God's attributes, but who knows? It probably has to do with his influence in the world or his ability to move around in the world in some way. Now, a very interesting thing is that electricity as a resource won over other forms of power like magnetism. If you know anything about Tesla and some of the things he developed with magnetic, power and magnetism being used to create basically infinite energy, many of these companies today, like Apple, IBM, Bayer, the military industrial complex, NASA, they've all communed with demons. Now, if this is news for you, then, hopefully you'll stick around for my cosmology series coming up at the time of this video. We will look at the heliocentric conspiracy and the history of so many conspiratorial things that have happened. But I'm telling you right now that all of the people involved with technology today, these major companies, they have either directly or indirectly been part of a demonic communion. The demons and the devil have been shaping man's discoveries, quote unquote, because all of these things, ultimately, what do? Well, they help bring people closer and closer to a new world order system where you can enforce worship without buying or selling, which requires a digital system. But electricity powers all of these things. And, there's some correlation, of course, maybe between Prince of the Power of the Air and electricity. And of course, all these demonic things are being powered by electricity. There may be some correlation there, but again, God is the one who controls the lightning. He's the one who's sovereign over all things. He's the one who created electricity. So we can't ascribe that particular dominion over electricity to the devil. So it's very important you understand that. It's vital to know that Prince of the Power of the Air does not mean that he has dominion over things that actually God has dominion. That's my goal with this. I don't know what it means. It is not vital to know what this means. It really isn't. It doesn't change any of your theology about the devil, about God, about anything else. However, if you obsess over it, like R.C. Sproul was talking about, and you drift off into myths, you risk affecting your theology. And you risk affecting your understanding of the gospel and of God, because it's easy to go into myths. Another important thing is the whole Prince of Darkness thing. That's not in the Bible either. When you call the devil the Prince of Darkness, that is not a title that the Bible gives him. He's Prince of the Power of the Air, but he's not Prince of Darkness. That's a made-up title that was given to the devil. I haven't bothered to look at the origin of it as to when it started, but nonetheless, it's a made-up title. The Bible doesn't say he's the Prince of Darkness. Now, in Luke 10, there's another follow-up to this, of course. In Luke 10, 17 through 20, Jesus sends out the 72 and they come back, and he makes a very interesting comment. The 72 returned with joy, saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." And he said to them, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you." Again, is he saying you are never going to experience any persecution and trials of any kinds? Well, of course not, because most of these people were martyred, especially the apostles. What it means is you will not lose your life, your actual life, your resurrected life. You will not be deceived. You will not be devoured by the devil. So be bold and go forth. "Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your enemies, or that your names are written in heaven." Very beautiful verse. Do not rejoice in the wrong things. Rejoice in having a relationship with Christ. Now, some say this is when Satan was bound. So this relates to Satan being bound. Some say that this is Jesus saying, he's remembering seeing Satan fall, basically pre-cosmic fall, and he's saying it. Oh, I remember Satan falling. Some say that Jesus is making a prophecy of Satan falling. So there's a lot of different views on this. And my goal today is, again, to show you what it's not. Because it's easy to make fairy tales out of these things. Because this is, again, one of those things that doesn't have a lot of context. It does if you understand the cultural situation going on here. But it linguistically, like textually, doesn't have a lot of context. So it's like, that's an interesting statement. So it's very easy to mythologize this thing. But now I'll tell you right away what doesn't have any sense whatsoever is the 72 coming back from exorcising demons and doing these miracles. And Jesus going, yeah, I remember thousands and thousands of years ago, I saw Satan fall like lightning in that pre-cosmic war. He rebelled. That makes zero sense. So you have to reject that interpretation off the bat. Of course, the other interpretations are about Satan either rebelling in the past or Satan kind of maybe losing his power at the time that they were doing these things. And I don't think that's either the case. I think there's actually a much more profound and interesting thing that is happening here, but it requires cultural context. The people first off, Luke is writing to a Gentile audience. And Jesus is also, in a Hellenized culture that people knew, even though they were Jews, they understood Greek culture. They knew the traditions of the Greeks because the Greeks had Hellenized everything. So I submit to you that Jesus is actually doing something very interesting here. He's not just saying something obvious like, oh, well, there you go, Satan lost his power. No, he's, as usual, if you're keen on this and you see the brilliance behind everything that God says, there's always something to it. It's truly profound how he does it. But he's making a reference to Zeus because people knew about Zeus. And of course, Zeus is the counterfeit of God, who is actually the one who wraps lightning in his fists and throws them down, according to the Bible that we just saw. So Jesus is making a reference to Zeus, which is interesting. And as usual, he's using the lesser to the greater. A lesser to the greater is a comparison of sorts. The lesser to the greater is like Zeus commands lightning bolts. You know how you guys think Zeus commands lightning bolts? Well, so too is Satan at the command of God. When he's saying, I saw Satan fall like a lightning bolt, he's not remembering something or citing some pre-cosmic rebellion. He's making a statement that all this stuff, all these fairy tales that you believe about Zeus, they're actually about God. That's a counterfeit of the Lord. The Lord is the one who wraps lightning in his fists. He does whatever he wants. And now that you've returned and seen the Lord's power over the enemy's kingdom, well, yeah, just like a lightning bolt is cast from Zeus's hand, so too is Satan at the leash of God. He does whatever God tells him to do, or what God allows him to do. Just like lightning from Zeus, that's the lesser. The greater is, so too is Satan at God's command. He does whatever God tells him to do or what God allows him to do. He is not independent. He's not an independent being, just like nobody else is an independent being. Only God is independent. It's similar to the parable of the strong man. When Jesus says, the strong man, he paints the picture of the strong man with the house. The only way to take his treasure is if you bind him, and somebody stronger than he comes and binds him. So it's like he sets up this enemy, but then there's the lesser to the greater. Like, well, man, if this guy is strong, well, how much stronger is the person who bound him? That's the whole point. It's really, truly brilliant how he does it. But I want to read you a little article on Stack Exchange. And let's see here. This is Biblical Hermeneutics Stack Exchange. When did Satan fall from heaven like lightning? Luke 10:18. This is a nice little discussion, but this is a thing I want to highlight for you. Roman mythology, not Jewish. Because the audience of Luke is Gentile and Greek, their first and primary framework for understanding this comment would have been Greco-Roman mythology, not Jewish mythology. The Book of Enoch, which many scholars and answers here reference for this comment, was in Ge'ez language, a Semitic language from Ethiopia that was distinct from Hebrew and Aramaic. While a Roman who lived in Israel might be expected to be fluent in Aramaic and know some Hebrew, it is doubtful he would have been able to read Ge'ez. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ge'ez maybe. Furthermore, as a Gentile, it is unlikely that audience of Luke was educated in Jewish schools and have an intimate knowledge of the Torah. Because of that, if Luke's audience was all aware of the angelic mythology of the Book of Enoch and the fall of Satan recorded therein, it would have been a very limited and broad basis. It would have been on a very limited basis. Instead, they would be first inclined towards Greco-Roman mythology. Let us try rewriting this verse a little bit based on that understanding. So this is now what would a rewritten option. So Jesus said to them, I saw the adversary fall like lightning from Olympus. This is just another way to rephrase it to make you a clear understanding. While I'm not suggesting this is a better translation, for the purposes of this exercise, it does help us to see the passage in a new light, which is probably closer to the original meaning. What happens instead is that we see Jesus comparing the fall of the adversary to the fall of Zeus's lightning bolt from Olympus. Something that would obviously be a literal allusion and a simile which is not to be taken literally. And Greco-Roman references are not unprecedented, with the author of Luke making references to Zeus in Acts 14 verse 8, Acts 28:11, and in other places. In these references, it is implied that believers are imbued with the strength of Zeus, just as in Luke 10 verse 18, which again, they're using these images that people know. They're using these images that people know because they're Gentiles. It's like that, but this is actually the real version of it. You're believing the counterfeit. This is the real deal. While I'm not typically into numerology, I also note that there were 12 Olympians consisting of 6 pairs and 2 major generations of gods. Similarly, the 72 were sent out in pairs, and 6 pairs times 12 Olympiads is 72, which seems to be an interesting coincidence, which is, again, if you watch, I'm going to take a little quick break here. If you watch my Nephilim episode, I talk about some very interesting things there with the Feast of Sukkot, where God apportioned to the nations an Elohim, a principality, 70 of them. And they were rebellious. And of course, all these nations became pagan and false, spiritual systems and so on and so forth. And the Feast of Sukkot was always held right at, like a week after all the pagan sacrificial festivals. A week later, the Israelites had their Feast of Sukkot where they're sacrificing 70 bulls. And there's a lot of breakdown there in that episode where people have made a relationship between the number of bulls and the number of principalities and gods that people worshipped. Basically, what's the point? The point is God was making a direct statement, a battle cry of, look, I'm coming to get you. You will be destroyed. Your agenda is going to be subverted. This is what's going to happen to you. Just like these bulls got sacrificed, that's what's going to happen to you. It was a profound political statement on behalf of God, spiritual and political. So with that in mind, and we have a precedent for that, to where God uses, a similar imagery to show his supremacy, we see a same thing here with the Greco-Roman mythology of the Olympiads being 72, where there were also 72 disciples sent out, i.e., this pagan system that's a counterfeit, I'm going to show you who actually has the power. Do you understand what's going on here? It's a profound move of power, and you have to understand the cultural context. If you don't, it's so easy to miss these things and to not appreciate them because they're really interesting. It's a profound picture of the spiritual and political heavenly dualisms and conflicts that are going on the spiritual level that you don't immediately see just reading it on the surface, which is very interesting. Last little section here. Ultimately, we should regard this as a simile comparing the casting out of demons to Zeus's defeat of his adversary, and not regarding this as a historic event, a prophetic event, or a reference to Isaiah 14 or Ezekiel 28. Thank you. In the IVP Bible Background Commentary, Dr. Craig Keener reminds us, quote, although the text often cited today is describing Satan's fall, Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, which again, we'll look at these texts, they're not describing Satan's fall, refer contextually only to kings who thought they were gods. Thus, Mark Black tells us in College Press NIV commentary, Jesus is speaking figuratively here, and his point is simply that Satan is being defeated as his demonic forces are being cast out. This is not a comment on the origin of Satan. Dr. Robert Stein agrees in the New American Commentary, stating, I saw, period. The verb saw can mean an ordinary physical experience, a gift of foresight or insight, or have a symbolic meaning. Here it should refer to the fall of Satan seen by the pre-existent Son, Isaiah 14. It is more likely, however, that it refers symbolically to what the exorcisms performed by the 72 meant. Their casting out of demons demonstrated the defeat of Satan. The tense of this verb, an incipitive aorist in Greek, is better captured by translating as I was seeing, meaning I was seeing Satan fall like lightning. Luke understood each exorcism by the 72 as demonstrating the defeat of Satan. In other words, like everything that happened step by step was just demonstrating the defeat of Satan through all of these events that were happening. And that is paralleled with the commonly understood mythology of the time by the Gentiles of Zeus and lightning bolts and things, so that people understand like, wow, this is the true God, not these false gods that we've been worshiping that can't do these things. So very important that you understand context, because again, it's easy to take this and mythologize it. It is not talking about a pre-cosmic fall. Jesus is not talking about Satan falling in the present and falling from heaven due to the disciples casting out demons. Meaning, for example, which we will get to later, the war in Revelation 12, this is not what is happening as a result of the 72 going out. That's not when the war happened. And the war is very likely figurative, but we'll get to that in the future. The point is, this is not to be meant to be interpreted literally. It is a figurative, symbolic phrase that uses things that people who were the audience, the Gentiles, that they knew and they understood, and appropriates them rightly to God. They didn't know the Torah. They didn't know all those things that I cited to you about God commanding the storms. They knew Zeus. So this is a way to bridge the gap to the Gentiles and show them, look, like you thought you worshiped the God of lightning and thunder. That's not true. This is the true God of lightning and thunder, the one who sovereignly controls all things. So very, very important to understand this. We'll talk more about the rebellion theories later and when the rebellion may have happened. Maybe it didn't even happen yet. Many different perspectives, but Satan falling like lightning is not talking about a rebellion. It is talking simply about the loss of jurisdiction that Satan suffered with the arrival of the Christ. So now, on to part 4. What is the devil's name?